It's the second hour of Overdrive here on TSN 1050, live on TSN 2. I'm Aaron Korolnek in for Brian Hayes with my friends Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star and Jamie Noodles McLennan. We'll have Trey Wingo, longtime NFL analyst and host. He's going to join us in about 5 minutes. We'll look back on just a crazy week of football, weekend of football. I do feel, guys, that almost every single day there was NFL action because there pretty much was. Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 games on Christmas. And I'm not sure how you guys were operating, but it was just so much football that I need a break. Unfortunately, there's football tomorrow. Wow. And when I say unfortunately, I mean I couldn't possibly be more excited for the Jets and the Cleveland Browns. Let's go.
What was your takeaway? What was the biggest, craziest game upset? Like, for me, it was the Kansas City-Vegas game, just because I read a tweet after, and I said this, and I'm not trying to be a hero or whatever, but when Travis Kelce got together with Taylor Swift, he's a distracted athlete, man. I'm telling you right now. I saw a tweet the other day, and I thought it was interesting. They said Travis Kelce's list of priorities. Taylor Swift, number 1, which is fine. Mm-hmm. Did you see that one?
Yeah, it was like Pfizer ads and his podcast.
Bud Light, and podcast. Oh, catching touchdowns. That's like number 6 on the list. And he has like 1 touchdown in 8 games, something like that.
I mean, it's an interesting question, Noodles, and you'd know this better than anybody because you've been in locker rooms with guys that have had public profiles, but we had that conversation with Jack Armstrong the other day about Grady Dick and the fact that Grady Dick has barely played any NBA game.
Can't shoot.
And he's already on the McDonald's ad and the shaving ad. And and they've trotted him out there as a hugely high-profile guy who's got all these other opportunities off the court, and he hasn't taken care of any of his opportunities on the court to date. Like, is that a real thing, do you think, Noodles? Do we overblow that because we see these guys doing other things, or do you think there is something to that?
There is, but it's hard not to. Like, it's not his fault that somebody comes to him and says, we'll give you $250,000 to be in a McDonald's commercial or to wear these shoes or to do whatever. And I don't know. I'm not speaking to the number. I'm just saying that's probably what he's looking at. And it's not his fault because his pedigree is there as far as how high of a draft pick he is. But from one athlete to another, I would say he's distracted because he hasn't taken care of the on-court stuff. Now he's a young guy and he's still progressing and growing, but sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind, not, hey, in your face, like, oh yeah, what's that player doing? Oh, he's doing nothing but being on every commercial and selling phones and shoes and you name it. It happens. I was talking to somebody about it this morning. I brought up the Travis Kelce thing. I played with lots of guys who got girlfriends, and what happens is they get to you fall in love, you get distracted, by your new girlfriend. There's guys that have kids, and it's a welcome distraction. It gives you perspective. It's how everybody handles it. And right now, it's easy for me being the hero pointing it out, going, he hasn't been pulling his weight. Now, Kansas City's not that good of a team. I don't think Mahomes is playing great. I don't think they have the weapons, and they're not getting it done. But it does look weird. It coincides with like, hey, Travis Kelce, here's Taylor Swift, here's, his podcast, his number 1 podcast. It's all of these, it's so noisy around him and he's not getting it done.
So you could look at it in a number of ways, and certainly the Taylor Swift, Yoko Ono comparison is there. But I also think the most likely rationale as to what's going on here is that Travis Kelce is just getting old. The guy's 34 years old, has been in the NFL for a long time, is going to go down as one of, if not the greatest tight ends in the history of the sport. Your body breaks down. He's not nearly the player that he once was. You could just see it. And Noodles, you mentioned the Kansas City Chiefs. They have now had under 20.7 times this year. From 2018 to 2022 combined, they were under 20 points 6 times. So this is a fundamentally different offense. Travis Kelce's, the wear and tear on his body, it's just blatantly obvious. He just can't run the way he used to. And say what you will about Mahomes, the offensive line, the lack of receivers, they've done a poor job drafting. They're using all these picks. Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round is a backup. Rashee Rice has been good, but Sky Moore was a second-round pick. They're not bringing any talent
Yeah.
for Mahomes, who's just running around aimlessly trying to find someone desperately to throw the ball to.
Yeah, it didn't help that Pacheco came back and then got hurt immediately, and he was they were counting on him to be a target and not only as a rusher but as a receiver. But the thing that I look at, Noodles, when I look at Kelsey is, is he the greatest tight end of all time? I don't know. There's a conversation there.
Yep.
Another guy in that conversation is Rob Gronkowski, who, by the way, is the exact same age, born the exact same year in 1989 as Travis Kelce, and has been retired for 3 years.
That's it. That's
after all that
exactly
wear
it. I
and
think
tear.
Luke Wilson, our good
Right.
friend, we need to get to Team Owen Wilson as well with the performance over the weekend against Hazenborough. We'll get to that a little bit later, but we have Trey Wingo on the line. He is the co-host of the Chasing It podcast and with the 33rd team. Good afternoon, Trey. How we doing?
Good, guys. How are you? Great to be with you.
Always great to have you as part of the show and on this station. Let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs and just how much concern you have with this team, this organization, and the direction that they're headed.
Well, it's pretty bad right now. I mean, that first quarter, I think they finished with minus 18 yards. That was the worst quarter of football yardage-wise in the NFL since 2004, when the St. Louis Rams had something close to that. I mean, and the St. Louis Rams of the early 2000s were horrendous. Okay, they were one of the worst teams in the last 25, 30 years in the NFL. So that's how bad it was. And I heard you guys talking about Mahomes and he doesn't have any receivers to throw to. That's absolutely true. But, if Patrick Mahomes doesn't make two horrendous mistakes, the Chiefs win that game. I mean, like two defensive touchdowns in 7 seconds, both on Mahomes' turnovers. The fumble towards the goal line, I have no idea why they were trying to run some sort of reverse lateral with a slick ball that close to the 5-yard line. That made no sense. And then right after the kickoff, he threw the pick six. So, look, I'm the biggest Mahomes supporter there is. I think he's going to go down as the greatest quarterback to ever play. But those two turnovers are 100% on him. And that's, the Chiefs defense did not give up a touchdown. Guys, Aiden O'Connell did not complete a pass after the first quarter, and somehow the Raiders won that game. That makes no sense. It makes no sense.
It is crazy. Trey, where are you at with Travis Kelce? Before you came on, I brought up, and I played in the NHL, and I played with lots of guys who, first fell in love, had, famous girlfriends, all of that. Where are you at with Kelce as far as maybe being a distracted athlete, or is it just, he's 34, there's some wear and tear, Mahomes isn't playing as great? Like, what would be your philosophy on everything there?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because a lot of people are going, well, what's going on with Travis and Taylor Swift? But I remember earlier in the season when they were 6-1, every time she showed up, he balled out. So, I mean, like people have forgotten that part, right? Go look through the first 8 games of the season, the difference in Travis when she was there and when she wasn't there. So if you're saying it's a distraction now, how come it wasn't a distraction back then? But to me, that negates all of that. I think this is a guy who started the year with an injury to his knee 2 days before the opening night of the season. Hyperextended that knee, right? And, he is 34, and he's played a long time. He's going to have his 8th straight 1,000-yard receiving season. But I think it's just a guy who probably wasn't right since week 1 and is now just trying to find a way to get through the postseason. Everything that the Chiefs have done offensively has been outside of Pacheco and the offensive line, which actually is really good. I mean, Juwan Taylor gets penalized a lot, but the offensive line is actually, their interior three is as good as anybody in football. But you go look at that game, like you guys were talking about, how many times did Mahomes have 4 seconds or more to throw, and nobody was open? Like, nobody was open. There's not a single receiver that scares anybody outside of Rashee Rice, and they're still that rookie is still sort of learning his chemistry with Mahomes. He's going to be great, but they have to blow up that receiver room next year. I think that's a huge part of the problem for Kansas City. And, Matt Nagy has not done what they wanted him to do, filling in for Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator. Let's be honest about that, too.
Trey, the big news in the NFL today, Russell Wilson is benched for the final 2 games of the season. Sean Payton says it's a football move, but everybody understands the contractual obligations for the Denver Broncos to Russell Wilson following this season. Break it down exactly why the Broncos made this move, and do you think it's the right one for the short and the long term?
Well, they have a 1.4% chance of making the playoffs, so that's sort of an irrelevant situation in terms of who starts at this point. It's a football move in the sense that it's for the football organization's financial well-being. I mean, he's guaranteed $39 million. in the contract, but he's guaranteed another $37 million if he doesn't pass a physical in March. And the Broncos are saying, well, right now we know he can pass that physical. So we don't want to do anything over the next 2 games that would make him not pass that physical, which would put us on the hook for another $37 million. This is clearly the first move in an attempt to get rid of Russell Wilson and get rid of that contract. That's. So it is a football move in the sense that he's trying to help the finances of the football operation. But, like go back to a couple weeks ago where he was just ripping Russell a new one on the sidelines. And I actually had a long interview with Sean before the season began, and I asked him, you and Drew Brees were tied at the hip. What happens if it doesn't work out with you and Russell Wilson? He said, well, yeah, but it's going to work. And it clearly hasn't. And, this is the end of the Russell Wilson era in Denver. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Hey, Trey, to that point, Tom Brady has criticized the league this year for so much mediocrity, not enough excellence out there. And it's kind of been true in the MVP race. Like there's been a new MVP favorite almost every week. Last week it was probably Brock Purdy, and then his odds went from like minus 200 to plus 1,200 after getting waxed by Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. What do you make of that? And what do you make specifically of the 49ers getting trounced 33-19 by the Ravens?
Yeah, first of all, Tom Brady needs to stop talking about how tough it was back in his day because he had the biggest layup drill of all time to 11 straight AFC East championships. I'm squarely in the Alex Smith camp here. Nobody had an easier run to a home playoff game than Tom Brady all those years in the AFC East. Like, give me a break there. He's not wrong about the lack of practice affecting football. Absolutely. But that's been in place for years since the new CBA where they took away practice, padded practice. That's the devil everybody signed up with to make more money, right? That's sort of where we are. So, I appreciate Tom and all that kind of stuff, but, the back in my day stuff, just whatever. You had the easiest run to a home playoff game of any team I've ever seen in 40 years of covering this sport. So that part of it, I just can't listen to anymore. There is no MVP. Right? There's no clear-cut MVP. Let me throw one out there that some of your listeners might like.
Ooh.
Why isn't Josh Allen getting more consideration?
I can answer that one for you. I mean, he was garbage for the first half of the season, throwing interceptions every single week.
Was he?
Yes.
Was he garbage, or was he being asked to do too much?
Well, of course, the OC change definitely has helped Josh Allen. There's no doubt about it. But I don't think we can just overlook him leading the NFL in turnovers for the first half of the year.
But he also leads the league in touchdowns, right? So those things, you can't talk about one without talking about the other. 40 total touchdowns for a fourth straight year. He's got 11 games this year with 1 rushing and 1 passing touchdown. That's the most of a single season in NFL history. He's done one more. He's going to tie Cam Newton's record. By the way, Cam Newton also needs to stop talking about his. I've seen some pretty stinking games in his past too. I just think that the Bills are nothing without Josh Allen. They are literally nothing without Josh Allen. And in a year where there is no clear-cut MVP, I think Lamar has to be there. Christian McCaffrey probably has to be there. I think that you could make a very compelling case for Josh Allen as the MVP.
And I think if they do win out and ultimately they win the AFC East, they beat Miami in the final week of the season, Trey, maybe that case could be built. But right now, it is completely up in the air. And again, we're joined by Trey Wingo, the host of Chasing It with Chase Daniel, 33rd team contributor. With Brock Purdy, it was staggering just to see him look completely lost against Baltimore on Monday night because he's been so composed week after week, and he was anything but against a Ravens defense that deserves a ton of credit. But has your confidence been shaken at all in Brock Purdy and what he could do with the San Francisco 49ers offense, or is that just a one-off?
Not really shaken because, you look at those 4 interceptions, right? And I think 3 of them were tipped balls and just sort of, there was only one really bad throw, right? There was one really bad throw. The other ones were just either a tip ball or really great plays by the Ravens defense. I'm one of these guys that does not look at every interception and say, that's on the quarterback. You really have to look at the situation, the schematics, what happened, and what was happening on the play. So I'm not looking at that game as like Brock Purdy just tossed him up. Like, for example, Nick Mullins, my God, for the Vikings, he should have had 8 turnovers in that game. Like, he only had 4. I mean, literally, he could have had 37 the way he was just throwing it around there. Like that, those are terrible. I thought Brock, I thought the Ravens just out-physical them. That was a big part of it to me. And I think they took it to a team that we all thought was arguably the most physical team in the NFL, and they got it handed to them. So I'm still not shaken on Brock. I think he's going to be fine, and he has the demeanor to handle a game like that. When they had that 3-game losing streak and he was throwing some interceptions, I thought he still played pretty well outside of the game against Minnesota, where he was clearly concussed in that game, and that was some stuff that was happening with him. So I'm not shaken on Purdy yet. If he has another one of these games down the stretch, maybe, but that team is so good. And they're so loaded. I think they'll be fine, and I think Brock will be fine.
Trey, Matt, my favorite story in the NFL this year is Joe Flacco's resurgence. The guy's on this couch on the practice squad, all of a sudden leading the Cleveland Browns to these prodigious numbers offensively. Amari Cooper looks like Michael Irvin all of a sudden. It's been incredible to watch the Browns, who for most of the year were regarded as one of the best defensive teams in the NFL. All of a sudden, Flacco has them cooking like I did not think was possible. Are you a believer in the Cleveland Browns here?
I'm a believer in the Browns, and I'm a believer in Joe Flacco. And if you'll just allow me to just launch on my pedestal here for a minute. When the Jets saw Aaron Rodgers go down week 1, Chase Daniel and I went on the podcast the very next day and said the guy they should sign is Joe Flacco. He was there last year. He played really well for them in 3 games last year. For most of last season, despite not playing after the first 3 games, he led them in touchdown passes because Zach Wilson was ass, right? Let's just be honest about it. So they had every opportunity. They had every opportunity to get Joe Flacco there and potentially save their season. And now load the irony, karma, whatever you want to call it, that right now, Thursday night, the Cleveland Browns can clinch the playoff spot with a win over the lowly Jets. I mean, it's just some things they right themselves. And the Jets have nobody to blame but themselves in this entire situation because they thought that just by Zach Wilson magically breathing the same air in the quarterback room as Aaron Rodgers, that he would be better. Go look at his numbers this year, look at his numbers last year, look at the numbers the year before. He's the same guy. And the other thing the Jets said is, we're not concerned about our offensive line. Their offensive line is putrid. So they could have done things to fix this, and they simply decided we're going to roll the other way, and they got what they deserved.
Hey, speaking of getting what you deserve, did Jair Alexander of the Packers, Trey, deserve to be suspended for one of the more bizarre charges I've ever heard levied against the player, that he crashed the coin flip on Sunday when he was not named an honorary captain, but went into the coin flip anyhow and apparently told the referees the wrong thing, and it screwed up the Packers' possession. Have you heard about this, and have you seen anything quite like it?
I've heard about it. I've never heard of anything quite like this outside of a controversy with Jerome Bettis on a Thanksgiving Day game the other day, a couple of years ago, where he swears he said heads and the ref said tails. Jair Alexander deserves to get suspended for being an idiot, right? I mean, like, what player just decides he's going to go out there as not a team captain and not tell anybody? And then he's laughing about it afterwards, they had my back, though. What are you doing? Like, that's what has Bill Parcells always talked about: conduct detrimental to the team and subversion from within. That's exactly what that was. Now, look, was it the most egregious thing ever? It was just dumb. And then you're right, he almost blew the call. He said, I want the defense out there, which could be construed as we're choosing the defense, we're not deferring, so we're not going to get it on either half. I mean, he complicated stupidity with idiocy. And I mean, you have to suspend somebody for something like that. There's no way around it. I mean, and just the way he was so casual with it after the game, I'm sure that had the coaches seething.
Yeah, it's a good thing he's an extraordinary athlete. Otherwise, things might be a little bit tougher for Jair Alexander.
Correct.
Trey, thank you so much for doing this. It's always great to have you as part of this radio program. We'll do it again soon. Appreciate your time.
You got it, guys. Happy holidays and have a great New Year, okay?
Same to you. That is Trey Wingo from the Chasing It podcast and the 33rd team. I will say the Jair Alexander shenanigans was the second dumbest thing that went down around football over the last week. Did you guys see that prop swap ticket that was purchased on Brock Purdy to win the MVP? Basically, it was 100 to 1. I think someone bet $2,000 on it, and the ticket was sold at a price where I think the implied probability of it winning was like minus 150. It was minus 250. Someone paid $125,000 for that Brock Purdy to win MVP ticket. And as quickly as you could see that 4-interception game going down, it's now literally worthless. It's like buying a stock. Jamie, you can empathize with me here. You're like, you know what? The earnings report's going to be great. We're going to do very well. And then the entire C-suite is embroiled in some corruption fiasco. So shout out to that guy who took quite the hit.
Well, it's the equivalent of you having a great product and the CEO being a jackass and driving the company right off of a cliff. Where you have a great product, but you're like, okay, why is that person running the show? I've seen it all too often. But yes, so I mean, Purdy in your mind has zero chance of climbing back on the horse.
Pretty much. It's hard to come back. He was basically Chad Kelly for the Argos against the Montreal Alouettes. It was that level of ineptitude. Every ball he threw was an interception. Sorry, Chad Kelly. He's our colleague here at TSN. I hate to invoke your name in this comparison. But it was very difficult to watch. And when you have that primetime game, the game of the year, everyone's hyping it up, the Niners and the Ravens, a Super Bowl preview, and the guy who's the MVP favorite goes out and throws 4 picks, you don't see how you come back from that one.
It's going to be tough, right? It's going to be tough. Like, to your point about Josh Allen, I think the recency of Purdy's bad performance hurts him. Whereas I agree with your point about Josh Allen not being MVP worthy because the first half of the season was so bad, but it was so long ago, and he's had such a nice stretch here that I think the voters may forget. And the voters, Noodles, are also in trouble here because there's no clear-cut favorite. Everybody who's been a favorite, like Dak Prescott was a favorite. He had a bad game. C.J. Stroud was a favorite way back when, and then he kind of had cooled off as a rookie. You know, Tyreek Hill was going to be the first wide receiver. Then he got hurt and hasn't played. So it's going to be a tough year to vote, and I think the recency bias is going to be a big factor.
I've always lived by this mantra that one game doesn't make a career, but I feel like in the NFL, one game can cost you. You know, a major award can cost you a lot of your, reputation. That's what I've noticed, from week to week. And I get it. You play one game and then you wait a week until it happens. So everyone talks about it for 6 days. But that's all you heard about Purdy. And you're right, Josh Allen, I like that you push back on Trey, AK, because he struggled at the start of the year. But yet, you know what? He's been a guy that has been pretty consistent getting touchdowns. He's a rock star, but he's also an erratic quarterback. He's all over the map. You never know what you're getting from him because he just always the most difficult path, he takes it. That's how I feel with Josh Allen.
Yeah, and I mean, Brady's not here anymore. Aaron Rodgers probably will never be an NFL MVP candidate again. Maybe some Jets fans or some delusional Rodgers supporters might believe that that could be the case. And Patrick Mahomes, I mean, the way that his offense is going right now, again, 7 games under 20 points this season, that is unheard of for a team like Kansas City. You're talking about kind of a new era, and we don't know what to do. And I think Lamar, unless he really goes off the deep end over the last couple of games of the season, he's in really good position. Now, the Ravens do play Miami next week, which is going to be an outstanding game. Miami coming off a huge win of their own against the Dallas Cowboys. And I mean, I don't think Tua or Tyreek have a chance anymore, but the NFL MVP discourse, I mean, it's alive and well. It's a good thing for the league. And there's no winner that's predetermined by any stretch anymore. It's not going to be a couple of guys like it used to be. It's wide open, and that's very intriguing to me.
I know an MVP's name that I could throw out to both of you, Rod Smith.
Yeah, very well done. Very well done.
He has somehow turned that tire fire around to the point where I don't know that if Hazenbrough can catch up. Right?
So, my understanding is done. Yes, you're right. Luke Wilson, Jeff O'Neill, Timo, and Wilson are up 8 on Hazenbrough, and there are 8 games remaining. So in theory, we could have a tie. That would be really the ultimate collapse of all time. But yeah, Timo and Wilson has Hazenbrough dormy right now. And we'll have Luke on the show tomorrow. I did see Luke over the weekend at a little bit of a TSN holiday get-together. He was in fine spirits.
I'll bet.
He was not. Well, he was. That was before the whole, all the transgressions of the winning for him and the losing for Hayes and Al's brothers. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, Rod Smith, executive of the year Like, no doubt about it. Whatever he's saying behind the scenes, the strings that he's pulling, I mean, truly remarkable stuff. Shout out to the legend, Rod Smith. We'll play role play level of concern on the other side. Darren Dreger and Josh Lewinberg still to come. Jam-packed edition of OverDrive. You're watching on TSN2 and listening on TSN 1050. I kind of felt like Nick Cage at times over the holidays. All the wine and booze, just feeling disgusting today. Even after a couple of days of recalibration, it still lingers there. Back on OverDrive, Aaron Korolnek in for Brian Hayes. That's Jamie McLennan, Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. This is role play level of concern. All OverDrive fans know how this game goes. You play the role of an individual, and you identify a level of concern all the way to Nick Cage, maybe a pint on the patio. And Noodles, you will be going first, and you are playing the role of Ilya Samsonov. What is your level of concern that your roster spot on the Toronto Maple Leafs is very tenuous?
Play it.
You can never, ever ask me to stop drinking.
Now, I was going to go with Rick Bushwood, which is that guy from Hamilton or whatever with the 6 Bud Light or whatever,
Bush
Tall
Light.
Boys
Oh,
and
yeah.
all that. Bush Light. But right now, just knowing where the team is at, knowing with how fragile he is, knowing what the expectation of this group, and I know the Leafs are, in second in their division, but if you look at the point spread, they've got games in hand, but it's like they're 2 points up on this team, 4 points up on that team. Like every game is still under the microscope. Like they're not free and clear of everybody. I'd like to see them get, a little bit more breathing room. And I don't know if that'll happen this year in the Atlantic. The teams are bunched up. Detroit won't go away. Montreal won't go away. Ottawa has games in hand, but it'll be just interesting to see. But I just don't know if he's got that runway with the patience of like, okay, give this guy 3 more games, 5 more games to get into a groove. I just don't know if they have the luxury to do that for him. So that's why I had the Nick Cage.
Well, he's given up 4 or more in 7 of his 14 starts this year. That's not a good stat. I would ask you, Noodles, you'd be uniquely qualified to answer this. If the Leafs put Samsonov on waivers, does he clear?
Yes, it's only on a 1-year deal.
He's on a 1-year deal,
So nobody's grabbing. Yeah. So he did the arbitration. He's on a 1-year deal. I don't think anybody would grab him based on who has the needs for a goaltender and has the price point. Because what is he making? Remind me, is it like 3.8?
Maybe a little bit less,
Yeah,
something like that.
3.4, 3. Yeah, let's call it 3.5. So 3.5. Edmonton doesn't have the luxury of grabbing somebody for $3.5 million. And would they deem he would be an upgrade over Calvin Pickard right now? Like they've got a little bit of stability in Skinner. They need another goaltender, but I think they need a veteran guy who's a proven kind of 1B or a 2. And Samsonov doesn't fit that bill. So I think he would clear. I don't think Carolina would grab him and go, okay, we can change him. So the teams would New Jersey. Like, I don't know if you watched Edmonton play New Jersey the other day. If you go back and watch McDavid scoring, Vanacek is facing the wrong way in the net. Like, the wrong way.
They've got problems in Jersey.
McDavid was staring at his nameplate as he shot the puck into the net. Like, there are 5 or 6 teams that need a goaltender. I don't think they would deem that Samsonov would be the upgrade, so I think he would clear.
All right, Dave Feschuk, you are playing the role of Masai Ujiri. What is your level of concern that the Raptors fan base will turn on you unless there is a quick turnaround?
Oh, come on now. I'm Masai Ujiri. I am the man who brought this, basically inept franchise, its only championship. So my level of concern is like sub pint on a patio. I'm like a non-alcoholic. I'm a non-alcoholic brew by the fire. I'm so cozy. And I know there's been naysayers out there, and I know the social media lights up with Masai trending every time the Raptors lose, and they've lost 8 of 10. But look, we know one thing about Masai Ujiri. He's not going to be rushed. And I think it's to his detriment personally if I'm not Masai Ujiri. But if I am Masai Ujiri, I'm not worried about the fan base. I got time here. I believe in my players. I believe I'm one move away from making this thing a lot better than it is, and I've made those moves in my career. So that's where he sits right now. Masai Ujiri is not worried about the fan base.
He might not be worried about the fan base, but he should be worried about the team he has constructed, and that is a certainty. I mean, they've lost 10 of 13. Yeah. They have 3 guys who are pending UFAs in Siakam, Anunoby, and Trent, who I don't know what type of value they have now as opposed to what they had last year or in the offseason. And you've traded your first-round pick for Jakob Poeltl, who doesn't play for you, and when he does, your team is worse when he's on the floor as opposed to off of it. So maybe Masai Ujiri, the person, shouldn't be concerned, but any rational person who follows the Toronto Raptors should be.
Well, to which Masai Ujiri would reply, Noodles, I don't care about the draft pick in 2024 because the 2024 draft is not a great crop.
Okay. Well,
so I'm not worried about that. And the Poeltl move, Poeltl's had some good moments as a Raptor. Right now, he's not having a good moment, but you believe that he can be brought around under the right circumstances. I think a lot of it has to do with the point guard that's running the pick and roll with Poeltl is Dennis Schroeder, and it's not a great match like it was with Fred VanVleet. So anyway, what do you think, Noodles? Where would you be if you're Masai?
I'm higher on it. I'm at least a 6-pack and a couple shots because I think how long you guys can speak to it, being Torontonians. How long does a honeymoon last here? Because it's been thin the last little while, and I know championship gives you a long leash. Championship gives you, statues, and we always say it. If you bring a championship to Toronto, they name schools after you, streets after you. But I talk to Raptors fans who are kind of like, what the hell's going on with this team?
That's
it. I think what it is the lack of communication. It's like, where is this team going? What is the goal? And I know Masai doesn't have to lay this out there for you. We're going to do this, this, and this, and we'll be right back there. But the lack of, what the hell's going on, I think that's where Raptor fans are getting frustrated. So I'm a little higher on this fest than just a pint on the patio. I'm at least a 6-pack and a couple shots.
Yeah, and I think your assessment of that, Noodles, was spot on. It's not about the wins and losses necessarily with the Raptors. It's about the lack of direction.
Yeah.
We have no idea, and I don't believe they have any idea which way they're going as an organization. Are they going to resign Siakam and Anunoby and run it back with those two and Scotty Barnes? Why would you do that? We've seen it for the last couple of years, and it doesn't work. So they've found themselves in a very difficult spot, have the Toronto Raptors. Josh Lewinberg will join us in the third hour of the show. Okay, I'm playing the role of the Denver Broncos. What is my level of concern that Russell Wilson's deal could go down as one of the worst in the history of the National Football League? Play it, Luca.
Yeah. You can never ask me to stop drinking.
So here's the thing about the Russell Wilson contract. He signed a 5-year contract extension worth $245 million upon being traded to the Denver Broncos. Do you know how many snaps he's played under that contract? Zero. He has not started that contract yet, and they're already jumping ship. Not to mention the dead cap hit for Russell Wilson. Now, if they release him before March 17th, the dead cap hit on next year's salary cap for the Broncos will be $85 million. It's almost a quarter of the salary cap gone before even having a quarterback. Now, they could also spread it over a couple of years if they release him following June 1st. But this is an abject disaster. It's not only about the salary cap implications, it's about the first-round picks they gave up as well. And the lost years and the commitments to Russ and just an absolute debacle. Now, I will say, I think the Deshaun Watson contract is worse in Cleveland. I don't know if he's better or probably about the same as Russell Wilson as far as the quality of their play. Keep in mind, that's a $230 million guaranteed.
Fully.
So you can't get out of that deal for the next 4 years for Deshaun Watson. But the question, one of the worst deals in NFL history, I don't see how you could possibly dispute it.
Oh, no, it's an absolute debacle. And the idea that, Sean Payton was going to come in there and turn Russell Wilson around.
We kind of did, though, right? His numbers are better this year, much better this year than they were last year. But yeah, the team's going to miss the playoffs. They're 7-8. They just lost to Belichick and the Patriots.
Right. I mean, it was a crazy plan. It is one of those great testaments to the salesmanship of certain coaches and the way they can sell a management team on the powers that they have. I think, look, speaking of the Raptors, we're looking at a situation where, hey, they thought the same guys could be turned around by a different coach after mean old Nick Nurse, wore all of his starters down. And it's not really working out, and it's really not working out under Sean Payton either, because guess what? It's not about the coach.
No,
it's about the guy.
You wonder if the Raptors should have hired Darko Milicic, the guy who went second overall behind LeBron, instead of Darko Rajakovic.
There you
Good
go.
pull there. I saw that on Twitter. Shout out to whoever tweeted that one out. Okay, Feschuk, you are playing the role of the Detroit sports fan. What is your level of concern that the Detroit Pistons, who lost 27 games in a row, have soiled the success? Have soiled the success of the Detroit Lions, who for the first time in 30 years won the NFC North. What's your level of concern there?
Oh, look, I mean, I'm not concerned at all about that. I am an absolute pint on the patio with this. I'm totally comfortable with the Pistons being the Pistons because the Lions are good. The Lions have won a division. I mean, shout out to the Tat Man, a lifelong Lions fan.
The Tat Man.
The Tat Man is rejoicing.
Playing vinyl in his underwear, celebrating that NFC North championship.
Yeah. And look, I mean, it's really unfortunate what's happened with the Detroit Pistons. I mean, friend of the show, Dwayne Casey, has been involved in that debacle of a program, obviously as coach since he left the Raptors and now in a management role. And it's not an easy situation to deal with when they've missed on draft after draft after draft. The trades haven't been any good. They haven't been able to draft. They haven't been able to trade. They haven't been able to develop. And now they are where they are with some young talent, but really not enough to get you excited. But the point is, the Pistons have won in recent memory. The Pistons, they had the Isaiah teams, the
Tayshaun Prince.
They had that team that beat the Lakers. Right. So there's success in Detroit basketball. The Lions can't say the same thing.
No,
and the fact that the Lions are showing some glimmers, not only glimmers of hope, but some in a year where it's wide open. Who knows? A division winner's got as good a chance as any other division winner to win the whole thing. I don't think the Pistons really doing what they're doing is taking that shine off a Detroit fan's mind right now.
Jamie, the longest losing streak you've been a part of in your NHL career?
It wasn't 27, I'll tell you that. It's got to be. I mean, I'm trying to think. Like Minnesota, I played for the Wild in expansion, but we would tie a game here. We would, win one. Like I don't think it was ever 10. Like, I feel it was like 6 or 7 type of thing. Like, I was pretty lucky to play on some teams where there was good leadership and some pride there where it's like, guys, we got to knuckle down whatever it takes type of thing. But I'm trying to remember if I ever hit double digits, like a 10 spot. I don't think we did.
It's like 27.
It would be miserable. Can you imagine 27? That is ridiculous.
So
you got to
you got to run into a win here.
You know?
Well, I will say Detroit plays Boston tomorrow night. That's a loss. They're in Boston. And then on Saturday night, the Detroit Pistons host the Toronto Raptors, who play against Boston the night before. Second half of a back-to-back for the Raptors in Detroit. What a pathetic way it would be if the Raptors lost to the Pistons.
If the Raptors lose that?
I can. Yeah. Yes, I can, actually. I can.
Dwayne Casey would storm. He would storm the court.
Yes,
like
he would.
He would.
Yeah, that would be something.
Hey, dude, like I tell you, I've been watching a lot of these Pistons games on the package, and you see it. Like last night, Brooklyn. They were down 5 in the fourth quarter to the Pistons, and Cade Cunningham had it going. But you just see from the opponent of the Pistons, it's like, we ain't losing to these guys, fellas. Like they're
looking at each other like, we're not doing this.
It's like a playoff game. It's like we cannot be the team that loses
7 in a row. Like it was the process Sixers, who I think were 1-29 to start the season back in like 2014.
And they lost 28 if you wrap it around to the next
exactly.
season.
No one has done what the Detroit Pistons. They are a true, utter embarrassment. All right, Noodles, last one. You're playing the role of Steve Staios, the president of hockey ops for the Ottawa Senators. What is your level of concern that some of the core players will need to be traded if the season doesn't get back on track rapidly?
I'm going to say it only because I'm going to say pine on the patio, and here's why. You said some. I don't think it would be multiple.
Okay.
I think what would happen is there might be one where you decide, okay, this isn't working. We're going to have a shot across the bow. You've already moved out the general manager. You moved out the coach. Now you're right. You're going to take a look at this group and continue to evaluate under a different coach, give them probably the rest of this year, and then evaluate in the offseason. I could see them tinkering depending on how the rest of the season goes. But you said some. I wouldn't say it'd be multiple. It might be one of the guys on a long-term deal. I don't know who would that be, a Batherson, Josh Norris. Shane Pinto's coming back, which is it's kind of under the radar, guys. Like Game 41's coming up. I believe he's allowed to skate with the team 10 days prior or something like that. Now, he's been in Ottawa working out. Thomas Chabot is apparently on the cusp of coming back. So that would be two players that would help this group out. It's too far gone at 24 points chasing everybody, but I still think they can make it interesting. And it'll be interesting to see how they assess everything the whole season. Because if they fire the coach, do they say, okay, well, we like this group under Jacques Martin? Does Jacques Martin go, hey, I've been in the room and this guy has to go, or that guy has to go, or we don't renew the contract of that, or we need to add to it. So I think there is going to be change, but I'm not on the camp of multiple players from that core.
14 games in the NHL tonight following the Christmas break. I know we're all fired up for each of the 14, including the Leafs and the Ottawa Senators tonight. You can hear that on TSN 1050. Darren Dreger in about 20 minutes. We'll talk to Josh Loomberg out of the Raptors and the Wizards. 5-win Washington Wizards for 8-point dogs on FanDuel, hosting the Raptors. Imagine that. Ooh, that speaks to the ineptitude of that basketball team. Lots of OverDrive still to come here on TSN 1050 live on TSN 2. OverDrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Korolnek, Feschuk, and McLennan around the table. And if you were betting on Latvia on FanDuel today, you are an idiot because they got smashed by Canada 10-0. 10-0.
Who would bet on Latvia?
Who would bet on Latvia?
Who would do that?
I don't know. Someone who's really dumb who may be talking at this very moment. Plus 6.5 goals. I wasn't sure what Canada was. We saw Finland lose to the Germans earlier today. Canada beat them 5-2. Listen, that was a very poor decision by yours truly. But, I mean, if you're backing Macklin Celebrini, you are feeling really good about yourself. A goal, 4 assists from the presumptive number 1 pick. And that Rousseau kid looking a lot like a young Jamie McLennan, pitching a shutout against the Latvians. That's the comparison that I've been hearing, Noodles. Young Jamie McLennan leading the Q and save percentage. Just saying.
Well, I mean, he's a good young goaltender, and in junior, I was actually a good young goaltender. But in my age group, I was trying to think. I was born in 1971. My peers were Felix Potvin and Byron Dafoe. I think those were the two best 71s in my age group, and I was kind of right in there. But I think Habby Bulin might have been a 7. I was trying to think in the world. I think Habby Bulin was a 71 too. But either way, Rousseau looked pretty good. He wasn't tested that much, let's be honest. Again, as I complained about to start the show, Al's brother could have played net. And I think he would have allowed 3 goals. He would have allowed 3 goals today.
Yeah, Al's brother's been moving well lately. I've seen him done a little scouting on Al's.
Very nimble. Looks very nimble.
Yeah, well,
looks good.
That's one
great
word
flexibility.
But Noodles, the interesting thing, Noodles, like to me as somebody who sort of observes the goaltending scouting carousel, where it seems like the greatest mystery in the sport of hockey is how do you find goaltenders? And here's a kid who hasn't been drafted by the NHL team yet, and a lot of people seem to be saying it's because of one thing. Because he's 5'11" and not 6 foot something. I mean, you were right on you were listed right at 6 feet. You made the league, but how much sort of value and weight do you put on a goaltender's actual height?
It's huge nowadays. The average height in the National Hockey League is 6'2" and 3/4. So let's call it 6'3", because there are guys that are 6'5", 6'6". You look at the good young goaltender. Jake Ottinger is 6'5", 6'6". Like all of these goalies nowadays, and they all have extremities that are really good. Good feet, good hands, good reading of the play. Markstrom's 6'6". Demko's a big goaltender. So Hellebuck's a big goaltender. The only guy who is sub 6 feet tall that is elite is UC Saros.
Right.
So if you have the skill of UC Saros, have at it, because he's one of the best goaltenders on this planet. The Calgary Flames have Dustin Wolf, who's under 6 feet, and he has the extremities of UC Saros. I think he's a special goaltender. But yes, if you're under 6 feet, you better be special. You can't be average, because a lot of times with traffic, with how quickly things move, you have to use positional play and your size. So that's what would be the knock against the goaltender. If he has average skill, you better have above average size.
Yeah, and that Celebrini kid has above average skill. That's been pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Connor Geekie, that goal to kick off the game today was a rifle, top shelf on the power play. It's a very likable team, this World Junior team. They don't have that superstar like Bedard, but Celebrini's a kid that we've certainly been tracking, and it's a very compelling lineup, and I'm excited to see them play against Sweden this weekend, of course, heading into the quarterfinals next week as well. Noodles, you have a flight to catch, so we're going to say goodbye to you. We'll see you tomorrow from 4 to 7. It'll be myself, Noodles, and Frank Corrado. So, Dave, you and I for the final hour of Overdrive up on TSN 2. You're listening on TSN 1050.